Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now, here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom and Tips, Tricks, and Triumphs Tuesday. So, if this is your first time listening, I'm a hypnotherapist, an NLP practitioner, a Reiki master, and a life coach. And so, for tips, tricks, and triumphs, I had a really good week starting actually last Wednesday when I got my second Moderna vaccination. And I really didn't have too much side effects. All I had was a sore arm for a couple days. And the day immediately after, I had some kind of non-specific, just didn't feel that great, but no real symptoms. So I felt really lucky on that. And then on Friday, I went down to a little art town near where I am and looked around and visited and actually had dinner outdoors listening to live music. And I really can't tell you how much I've missed that. It just really made my week. And then over the weekend, since I'm alone here and my family's up in Washington, I spent it catching up on things and doing some writing for my book that is going to be coming out hopefully sometime in June. So that I actually really enjoyed doing that, and it made a great week. Unfortunately, today has not gone all that well. I'm For me, it's gone pretty well, but my guest for today, apparently, she hasn't been able to get on, and unless she pops in, she was rebooting her computer when we last corresponded, and unless she pops in, it looks like she's not going to turn out for today. So if she does in the next few minutes, I'll be happy to do the interview. And if not, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my book that I'm writing that I hope, that I'm planning to have released in June. The book is called The Guide to Living in Joyful Resilience, or at least I'm pretty sure that's going to be the title. It is about joyful resilience and kind of the difference between just plain resilience and what I call joyful resilience. So the book actually spends a lot of time defining that, defining the qualities of it, how you can develop or nurture those qualities in yourself. And then it has a section on stories of resilience that I've gotten from other people and also from some that I tell myself about family members, my own resilience story, and some some of clients. And then it gives practices, exercises, and resources for developing resilience. What inspired me to write the book was, of course, our year of COVID-19. Writing a book on joyful resilience was always on my list of um, books that I wanted to write, but it wasn't going to be my first book until we, unexpectedly experienced this year that has caused us all to have, a little more resilience um, than we were expecting, and in some cases, more resilience than we thought we had. Um, so that moved it up to the front of the list. And it was going through this year actually that um, changed some of my ideas about resilience. It brought about some awarenesses both in myself and in others. And so I'm really excited about the book and sharing it. I think it will both, um, I think it'll bring about awarenesses in people about resilience and where it comes through, um, or where it comes from within them, and that it isn't a constant, that we can and do, we all do develop uh, our resilience over our lifetime. But um, people go through it differently. And I've been, in my lifetime, I've been both resilient and what I now call joyful resilience. And joyful resilience is just, it's better. And I think it both is better for regenerating more resilience in you and keeping you mentally, physically, and emotionally healthier. So that's one of the things that I discuss in the book. So I'm beginning to think that my guest is not going to show up. Um, these computer things happen, and through all of last year, I had one guest that didn't show up. Through all of my Embrace Change show, I had one guest that didn't show up. And so I'm hoping that this is the one guest for this year. Unfortunately, it happens. And I'm sorry, because I know that a lot of people did respond and were interested in hearing about some solutions and money uh, advice for your businesses. The good news is that I have another show on that uh, topic that will actually air on April 20th. It is another um, coach that works with um, women and entrepreneurs on money and financial issues, and helps them with their business. So if you are really interested in that topic, you'll be able to tune in for that on April 20th. And my guest is Victoria Romano, or yeah, Romano Sexton. And she has, she's just written a book herself, or that's going to be coming out, I think, in July. And she has a group called the Wealthy Women's Club, where she gives um, advice. So, if you missed this one, uh oh. I think she's coming now. So,
Am I in?
hello, nice to see you.
Ah,
I've
it's
been
finally connected.
blabbering on about various topics here, trying to see if you were going to show up.
Sorry about that. I just kept hitting the link and hitting the link and hitting the link, and finally it went through. So I was like,
Okay, well, nice to see you. I was just explaining that if people were wanting some business advice, that they might not get it today, but I'm glad
sorry
you
about
made
that.
it. So, and this is Karen Koenig, and she's an author, speaker, and financial advisor with over 30 years of experience, mostly in male dominated industries, including military, aerospace, and finance. And she became her own boss and a financial advisor about 5 years ago. So she specializes in sharing her expertise with women entrepreneurs and emerging leaders. And I'm glad to have her here today. So I'm going to ask you first to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and what led you to go into financial advising on your own.
Okay. So like you said, 26 years in the military. Then I worked for 6 years in aerospace. Ended up in Washington State because of transferring with that company from Tucson. So originally from Nebraska, spent 10 years in Tucson, and then in 2012 moved up to Washington State. And kind of got disillusioned with the aerospace industry. I didn't really like where I was going. So my advisor, the guy that used to work for me at in the aerospace industry, he became an advisor, and then he was my advisor. So I asked him about the company that he worked for. He said that he loved the company. They were just, the best company he'd ever worked for. He would never work for another company. And he used to be a blue collar worker and a telephone lineman, and now he wears a suit every day. And I went and saw him after I became an advisor, and I told him, I said, well, if you can be successful in this industry, then I certainly can be successful in this industry. So it really was kind of attributed to him because I trusted him as my advisor. I trusted him as an employee. And he really told me about, working for the financial company that I work for. And I just thought, you know what? I'm 49 years old. If I'm going to start a third career, then I need to do it before I'm 50. So that's what I decided to do.
Okay. So, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you had lived in Tucson. I live about 20 miles south of there now.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. So, what was the motivation for your book, The Women on Top?
So it really, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was working in three different male dominated fields. So obviously the military is super male dominated. I got in the late 80s when women weren't really welcomed into the military. So I kind of broke through that barrier. I was an electronic mechanic, so I was in a shop of all men. So I chose a profession that wasn't, one that women normally chose for the military. And kind of went from that male dominated field after 26 years into aerospace, project management. Most project managers are male. And being in the aerospace industry is also a hard industry to be in, and something hard to break through. And then switched over to financial advising, and really they haven't come that far in the financial advising realm either. They've only gone from 19% back in the 80s to about 23% females in the whole industry. So we haven't come very far even in the financial industry. So that was kind of the background for the book. And really what I did is I told stories in the book about what I learned It's not a male bashing book at all. It's more about what did I learn from all the men that I worked with. In the military, I worked for a lot of men, but then it kind of switched. And when I was in aerospace, a bunch of men worked for me. And then now I'm my own boss. So it was really just kind of telling the stories about how I got to where I was and what I learned along the way. And, kind of gave it in such a way as it's kind of an instructional manual a little bit. You can read through it. It's got a little workbook that you can work through. And I mean, it's not really talking about anything, really out of the ordinary or unique that people don't really know, but it's told from my point of view. So I figured I had a story to tell, and that's why I did it.
Well, I think that's a useful perspective. I think um, a lot of the books or resources that cover that do a lot of male bashing or
Mm-hmm.
complaining, which, although I do understand the origins of, because I also worked in male dominated fields, um, but it's not helpful. It's just not uh, useful in.
Yeah, and I interviewed a bunch of women about being in male dominated fields too. So a real estate agent, I interviewed a lady that was an engineer and really kind of told their story too. And it just kind of put like a little bow on the fact that, really women are different in the workplace than men are. And we approach it differently than men do. So that's kind of why I developed Empowering Women Leaders, because it's like we need to understand that we don't have to be 100% proficient at something to just do it. Men jump right into things, whether they know how to do it or not. And women are like, oh, well, I could never do that job because I know nothing about it. Men don't talk like that. So,
Right. Yes. So, what's the most important thing you've learned in your life, and how did it help you?
so I would say that something that shaped my life and that I learned at a young age was my mother got sick when I was 19, and she had to be put in, basically committed to a hospital because she ended up developing a disease called Pick's disease, which is like Alzheimer's, but it strikes younger and it lasts for a very short period of time, where some people can have Alzheimer's for like 20 years. So she was diagnosed when I was 19 and she passed away when I was 25. So the most important thing that I learned was that, and I just started becoming, I'm probably going to get a little emotional. I just started becoming, really good friends with my mom at that time. And then I had to turn around and kind of be the parent. So what I learned is you really, in order to help your children, no matter what age they are, you need to have some type of plan set up for your last wishes. How do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Where's your will? What kind of life insurance policies do you have? So I have a couple of friends who have kind of designed some businesses around that. I don't know if you know Maureen Curris. She does Radiant Morning, and it's really about that. It's sitting down with the family and putting that life plan together. So that was probably one of the most important things that I learned at a really young age, is the importance of having some type of life plan. And that really has nothing to do with what I do now, but it affected me because here I was the executor of my mother's estate. I was 19. I had two older brothers and a younger sister who was 8 years younger than me. So she was 11 at the time, and we came into some money. So part of the lesson was I probably should have put that money into a trust for my sister. And, she ended up spending it all by the time she was 18. And so it's the whole financial piece around it too. It's like um, nobody knows when they're going to go and how it could affect the rest of the people in your family. So
Yes, definitely. So, what's the biggest failure or mistake, and what did you learn from that?
I would say probably one of my biggest mistakes or failures is I used to, and I talk about this in the book, I used to jump into things very quickly without researching, if it sounded good, hey, I'm going to do that. Or I would jump into a conversation that maybe I shouldn't have been in at the time. So one of the biggest things that I learned is you got to step back and you have to kind of understand what's going on. You have to assess the situation, but you don't have to over assess it. So there's a happy medium. You don't want to jump into things, but then you don't want to not do things either. So I took it as a lesson. It's kind of a failure because it got me in trouble sometimes in the military because I would jump into things, or I would try to, I was enlisted for 14 years, and then I became an officer. I got commissioned partway through. And then they did the most hardest thing to me. They put me back into the same area where I used to be enlisted. And now I was their boss. So I felt like I kind of failed in that role a little bit because nobody taught me how to do that. So
Yeah. I can see how that would be hard for.
it is, because then you have to give up the friendships, because it was a friendship before you were peers, and now you're not peers anymore, and they don't necessarily want to do what you tell them to do just because you used to be a peer. So I think if I would have had a mentor at that time, I think I would have done a better job. So
What resources have helped you the most along your way?
I would say having a mentor or having a sponsor. So there's a difference between someone who sponsors you in business. Men get sponsored. Men get someone that takes them under their wing and pulls them up through the ranks. That's sponsorship. And women get mentors who help us figure out what to do and when to do, and this is what you should do with your business. And we're not necessarily sponsored. So I think that knowing the difference between the two and using them differently is a resource that helped me along the way, because I had a sponsor when I was working in aerospace down in Tucson, and he pulled me up through the ranks and said, this is where you want to be. This is the executive, management that you want to strive for. And he's the one who told me to come up to Washington State and get into the commercial side of aerospace. And I was on the military side. I was in the service side of that company. So using the mentors and the sponsors is probably the biggest resource when you're in a job, and then learning from that to be able to take those skills into being an entrepreneur. I mean, I love being my own boss. I love making my own schedule. There's no limits to how much money I can make, because it's all up to me now. It's however hard I work or don't work, or if I go on vacation or don't go on vacation. I don't have a boss saying, okay, this year you're going to get a raise, maybe next year you're not. This year you're going to get a bonus, this year you're not. Everything I do now is based around, what I do. So that's, so the resources are, the mentors, the sponsors, and, having them help you along the way.
So, what inspires you to do what you do and to be
well, what I found, it seems probably weird to people that I went from being in the military to being in project management to being in financial services. But the one common denominator between all of that is working with people. What I found is I like to work with people. And I like to be able, I'm really good at looking at a person and telling what they're good at. And I've helped people get out of jobs that they thought that they wanted to be in because I looked at their skills, I looked at what they like to do, I looked at, maybe their hobbies, and I would say, do you really understand that you're probably not in the right industry? You should be over here doing this. And one example is when I was working in Tucson, I had a gentleman work for me, and he was basically, mechanic electrician type guy, and he was struggling. And so then I took him and I put him in the we had like a call center. So I had him working in the call center for a while, and he wasn't able to do that because he was not good on the computer. And then I sat down with him one time and I said, well, what do you really like to do? And he says, well, I really like to teach. And I'm like, well, and then he tells me that he has a degree and he has a teaching certificate. And I'm like, why are you not, working at the university or being a teacher or something like that? And I ended up having to fire him just because he couldn't do the job and be successful at it. And that's when I told him, I said, you need to go do the job that you were meant to do, and that's teaching. So I've been, I think, pretty good at, like I said, looking at people and then, helping them. Because lots of times, people won't tell you you're doing the wrong thing. And I see great potential for you. And here's where you should go. You should be over here doing this type of job instead.
Yeah, I think some people get started in the wrong direction and then, have a hard time making the switch.
Well, and they may be, influenced by their parents. They may, parents might have said, you have to get a degree, you have to go to college. And they really didn't, ask them what they wanted to do. And that was kind of one of the stories I told in my book was about the engineer. She went into engineering because that's what her dad did. But she liked teaching. So then she ended up developing a school out in, it was on a farm, and it was like a cooperative, like a school cooperative. And that's what she ended up doing for the later years of her life. And she told me she was just so much happier doing that. I mean, and that's a big stretch from engineering to being into, teaching toddlers and small kids. So
yeah, it's actually surprised me how many people in the coaching and healing industries actually have backgrounds like that from engineering or something very technical. And yeah.
I think you'll find that a lot because I'm very musical. So I'm very logical, and, I like, logical things, and math is I like math and I like numbers, and I'm a nerdy financial advisor now. I like placing the trades and watching people's money grow. But I play the flutes, I sing. So I've got the musical side of me too. So I think there's two parts of your brain sometimes, and you tend to not do one over the other because you think maybe more about money than you do about happiness.
Yeah, it's good when you can actually combine or use both of those in some way in your life.
Right.
So, what is your biggest challenge, Ben, and in your role now? How have you learned to, kind of lean into it? Or
so I would say the biggest challenge that I've had since beginning is there in our particular industry, and the particular company that I work for, they had they kind of operated that like in a little box, and it's the way that you bring on clients, and they're big into the door knocking. And I didn't do that except for when I had to bring in, a certain amount of clients and that kind of stuff while I was, in performance, being, driven by the performance part of it. And I decided to start networking and going to networking meetings and meeting women and deciding what type of women I wanted to be around. I developed a niche, and then I developed, okay, this is what I'm going to go after. But what ended up happening is because I did do a niche market type thing, it attracted all these other things to me. And I was poo-pooed along the whole way by men in my industry and in my region. And every regional meeting, every meeting that we went to for, summer regionals, that type of stuff, they would always have these men up there talking about how to bring on clients and that you should go door knocking and you should do this and you should do that. And it's the only way to do it. And I went in a different direction, even though they kept telling me to, drink the Kool-Aid, do it the way that we say. It's a proven method. And it's like, well, now because of COVID, my networking never stopped because it just went from being in person to being online. So I never missed a beat and ended up doing the best I ever have in my whole career last year. Because I attracted the right people, fortunately or unfortunately, because people either lost their job, moved jobs, or maybe they retired earlier. It gave people a pause and they started dealing with their finances because they had the time to do it. So back to the question, my biggest struggle has always been the way they tell us to do it. And I'm like, there's other ways to bring business to your company or whatever you do for a living. And it's about trust. And that was one of the things that they said. It's all about moving the trust needle. And who better, us women, know the best way to get a loyal person who comes and helps or works with you is because they trust you. That's why, So that's really been the biggest challenge, is trying to prove that there's other ways to do things and be successful at it at the same time.
Yes. And I think all women who've worked in male-dominated industries have probably dealt with that. You probably don't know this, but before I was a coach and a hypnotherapist, I was a sales and marketing consultant.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
And,
yeah. That's completely different.
that, I was, in sales for a long time and kind of a serial entrepreneur. But I got into sales because after my divorce, I actually tried to do computer programming. I went to school for that and then discovered I just really wasn't a computer programmer. I could do it, but I wasn't like those guys.
Right.
And so I went into selling that kind of stuff. But when I first applied to be a sales rep, they told me, no, you don't have the right personality.
Wow.
Yes. And that actually really motivated me that I was going to do it and I was going to be successful, because I knew that there was another way of doing it, not their way.
Right.
So,
and it's hard for them to listen and accept that there's different ways to do things.
mm-hmm. Yes. So, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to pursue, your career?
Well, so I'm actually on, the recruiting team for the company that I work for. And all we ask is, well, one, you have to have a degree, but it doesn't matter really what the degree is in. We say that you have to be good with people and you have to be able to have people trust you with their money. So as long as you can have a conversation, you can bring people in, you can, bring them on as clients, then that's all you really need to know, because you can learn everything else. Because a lot of people will ask me, well, how did you learn about how to invest and do all that kind of stuff? And it's like, well, I learned that behind the scenes, and I leaned on my vendor consultants to help me create a portfolio so I can invest this person's money. And then I started diving into things later, but my biggest job was going out and talking to people and seeing if they wanted to do business. So a lot of people say, well, did you have to have a degree in finance? And it's like, well, no, I do have 2 MBAs. There is economics and accounting classes and that kind of stuff inside of that. But that didn't really lend anything towards being, a financial advisor. It was the fact that I like to work with people. I like people. I like to help people. I like to see people grow, just like as being a project manager and you're working on a construction project, you're working cradle to grave, right? The beginning of the project to the end of the project until, you put the last handle on the door or whatever, the carpet on the floor. It's kind of that way in financial advising. I want to work with people cradle to grave. I want them, I want their kids, I want their grandkids, I want their parents and their grandparents. So I want the whole family. And then I just present like a holistic approach to that. So, it's not just the investing, but there's other parts to it too. So it's being good with people. That's all it is.
Yeah. So, what do you wish that you had known before you got into the financial advising?
I wish that the opportunity would have been presented to me sooner. I think that because everybody, and even me, had the misconception that you needed to know a lot about financial planning and financial advising and the finance piece of it. I wish I would have had a conversation with somebody in my younger years, because I think that I probably would have been a good fit. But, again, I still think, though, nothing is coincidental. And perhaps I wouldn't have been as good as I am or liked being a financial advisor if I wouldn't have gone through that other stuff that I had gone through. So,
yeah, I think sometimes doing what what you aren't intended to do, or what isn't your best fit, kind of makes you more aware of what you want to do and what you really do fit in.
right.
So, this question might seem a little off topic, but I've been asking all of my guests for a while now, so I'll ask you as well.
Okay.
So, what has surprised you most about life so far?
I would say probably that as much as you want to control life, you can't. That you really need to spend your time being with your family members and telling to them that you love them, and not worrying about the day to day, because I feel like I missed out on being a parent because I was so busy building my own career and doing things. So that's why now I love being a grandparent, because now I can turn around and do all the things that I wasn't, really present for when I was, in my younger years. And I think that's part of what, I think we miss as we're going through life, is just, it's that old adage where you need to stop and smell the roses. You just do.
Okay. So, we're just about out of time. If you could leave the listeners with one thought from today's show, what would you want that to be?
I would say probably the overarching theme from the questions is you need to pursue what makes you happy, and not necessarily what you think everybody else thinks you should be doing. You and I are both proof of that. You were in something completely different, and now you're a coach, and you're doing what you're doing now, as opposed to sales. And I came from the military and then went into project management and then into sales. So I think we spend a lot of time doing things that we don't need to do. And if you would just pursue what your intuition is telling you to do, I think you'll be happier.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
There's several ways. I've got a Facebook page, Empowering Women Leaders, and then I'm also on Instagram. I do have a website where I've got a copy of where you can go buy a copy of my book. It's www.womanontop.biz, so it's woman with an A. And there's also a money type quiz that you can download. There's a talk that I give about the 5 money types, and there's a quiz that you can do off my website. So,
okay, that sounds good. Well, I am so glad that you did make it, and we were able to actually.
yeah, me too. Thanks for being patient. I was trying to get on my phone, and then it was like, oh, there's the computer. It's finally doing what it's supposed to be doing. So yeah.
Well,
Thank
great.
you.
I wasn't actually sure if somebody could pop in mainstream, but now I know.
Yep.
So,
Yep. It let me in.
good. So I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank the listeners for being here today too. We have another great show planned for next week. Next week, my guest will be Emily Lewis, and Emily is a singer, songwriter, and she's also very creative, coach, actually a creativity coach,
Wow.
and a truth seeker. So be sure to tune in. We'll be talking about her new singles and album that are coming out. And that'll be next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And I have a quote for you to take with you through your week, related to today's show, actually. And that quote is: money moves from those who do not manage it to those who do. And that was said by Dave Ramsey. So I'm just going to say bye for now. Have a great week. And thank you again, Karen.
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Soul Fire Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brightened your day, or sparked a new thought, we have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to Soul Fire Wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.